Rise and shine, Classic fans! Wednesday is a countdown to Classic Day. This is a podcast that educates, informs, and gossips about World of Warcraft Classic. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we discuss the news, hot button issues, and content of the highly anticipated World of Warcraft Classic. I'm your host, Josh Corbett, and thank you for joining me here on Countdown to Classic. Now today, we'll be hearing an amazing interview with YouTube personality Soupasoka, who sits down with me to discuss the general landscape of vanilla World of Warcraft and what we love about this game, as Countdown to Classic continues to bring you interesting voices to help expand your knowledge and appreciation for all things vanilla World of Warcraft. This is an interview that was actually recorded on April 8th, so we're going back some weeks now, which will explain a couple of dated references you might hear during the chat. You know the drill by now, people. In my interviews, none of the questions are pre-screened, and no favors or payments have been exchanged for an interviewee's appearance. Now, how about we just get straight into it and hear from Soupasoka in this great, in-depth interview. Enjoy, everyone. Okay, so for today's interview, we have the one, the only, Soupasoka. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
It's, again, you reached out to me a couple of weeks ago now, and I was so elated to see you wanting to be on the show. So here you are, and I know a lot of people want to hear from you and what you've got to say about all things World of Warcraft. So I figured we'd kick things off with, for those of listeners who don't know perhaps who you might be, how about we go through your World of Warcraft resume over the next 5 minutes or so? You ready?
Sounds good. Let's do it.
All right. So, question number one, who are you and where can we find you online?
So I'm, I guess, Soupasoka, but most people call me Soup. And you can find me mostly on YouTube. I'm also on Twitter, YouTube at Soupasoka Gaming and Twitter at Soupasoka Gaming.
And how long have you played World of Warcraft?
So I started World of Warcraft in the open beta in October, November 2004. I played until about mid-2007, then I quit, and then I restarted in about 2015, and I've been playing ever since. Okay,
and what was your main character's name, your first character?
My first character, and the only character I had back in retail vanilla, was named Sokaero, like Sokaero. So the first part of that name, Soka, was used as the last part of my YouTube handle.
And what was that character's class and race?
That was a level 60 undead rogue, so pretty cliche.
That's all right. And what other classes did you hit level cap with, if any?
So in retail vanilla, I never played any other characters. The only character I played was my rogue. On private servers, I have 60 warrior, 60 rogue, 60 warlock, like a 55 mage.
Nice. And what was the server you played on in the vanilla days?
So that was a US PvE server. It was Malagos, but most of my guild, we transferred with a free transfer, probably in late 2006 to Mataran.
Okay, and it sounds like I might already know the answer to this one, but do you gravitate towards PvP or PvE?
Definitely PvE. I am awful at PvP, and the only PvP I ever do is Alterac Valley, which is probably not really real PvP.
Okay, fair enough. Did you raid, and if so, what was your highest raid experience?
Yeah, so I would consider myself a hardcore player back in the day, and we cleared all of Molten Core, Zul'Gurub, Nixia, Blackwing Lair, AQ20, AQ40, and probably 5 or 6 bosses into Naxxramas before the launch of the Burning Crusade.
And are you currently playing WoW now, and where?
So I play on one private server right now on Chronos, the original Chronos server, and I play on Legion on the live servers, which I actually spend a fair amount of time on the live servers now.
Okay, and final question of this resume. Just so we know where your allegiances lie, complete this sentence. For the...
Definitely for the horde.
There you go. All right. Thanks very much for all that. So now we get to know you a little bit better. And now we're going to get kind of into the crux of the show. But just before we get into all the good things, I just wanted to bring up that now you took the shears to yourself the other day and you got rid of something that had kind of become your calling card, your beard. So my first question really of this interview is, what do you prefer, beard or no beard?
I think I prefer my beard, but I've had it for a couple of years now, and it was time to get a clean shave and get ready for the spring.
It's something that I've watched listeners, if you haven't seen, there's a great time-lapse video on Soupasoka's YouTube channel that you should check out if you want to see Super having a bit of fun getting rid of that thing. But one thing for me in watching that video, I think you should have kept the Tom Selleck mo. It looked fantastic.
Man, I strongly consider that. Actually, in that video, it's like a cut where I walk out of the room, you don't see it, and my wife wanted to take a bunch of pictures of me with that mustache. So I walked out of the room, got a bunch of pictures taken, and then came back and then finished the job. She
must have been voting for the mustache, right?
I wouldn't say voting for it, but I think laughing at it might have been a more accurate term.
Okay, all right. Now, look, we've got a few areas to cover through this interview, but if it's okay with you, I don't want to bury the lead for the listeners. So on what is obviously a WoW Classic podcast, I figured that we'd start, funnily enough, with your experiences in the vanilla days of Warcraft. Does that sound good to you?
Yeah, it sounds great.
Fantastic. All right. Well, let's kick things off. Now, you touched obviously in reading us your resume that you're quite confident that you would term yourself as a bit of a hardcore player, and you definitely hit the higher end of the content in the vanilla days. So, but you said one thing actually that I just want to begin with that piqued my interest. You said you played in the open beta. Is that right?
Yeah. So I played, I think it was literally 2 weeks before WoW was launched. They had an open beta. Maybe it's only a week. It was a week or two, I think. And that's when I actually started playing WoW.
Now, obviously not a boatload of people got involved in the beta. I mean, most people I've spoken to, well, I'll take that back. Obviously, I meet day one players, but the vast majority of people I meet came to the game quite soon after launch. But I've never actually spoken to anyone that was involved in the beta process. So do you have any memories of that beta? And if so, what were sort of the more positive or negative feelings in going through that experience?
So the beta, this was the first MMO I ever played. My older brother, who's a few years older than me, played EverQuest a ton, and he tried to get me into it once, and I was only, maybe 14 or so at that time, and I really didn't enjoy EverQuest. So I never played it more than 4 or 5 hours. So in the open beta, and honestly, it's been almost 14 years, like 13 and a half years. So my memory isn't the best for that. To my recollection, I played Alliance, and I played what I think was a gnome mage. I know I rolled a gnome mage once they launched, but I think I played a gnome mage. And as far as I remember, the open beta didn't feel much different than the launch WoW. I think in that last week or two, there weren't massive changes. Mm-hmm. The one thing I do remember briefly was I'm pretty sure as the countdown to the closing of open beta occurred, the GMs in the game dropped infernals and other like dreadlords or demons of some sort, I think, around some of the capital cities, like almost like an invasion.
Right.
Just to see what the players would do. I'm misremembering that, like it's a false memory or not, but I'm pretty sure I remember experiencing that really briefly.
And was that just to mess around with the players to see what they would do?
Yeah, I think it was purely just the GMs having some fun because the whole beta was getting shut down. At the end of the beta, they wiped everything, so you didn't get to carry your characters over into the release of the game. So I think they were just having a little bit of fun.
Nice. Now, in saying that it wasn't that different, were there any kind of... I appreciate that it was a really long time ago. Is there anything that sticks to memory about being a game-breaking bug that they blatantly fixed in 1.1 or anything like that?
I'm sure there were, but I only probably got to level 20 or so. I wasn't like high level by the time the beta was closed. It only was open for a couple weeks. Most of my memories honestly were running around. I got to Stormwind, I remember, and I remember running around in Elwyn Forest and Stormwind a lot on my mage, and that's about as far as my memory goes. So I honestly can't say if there were major changes. I'm sure there were some, but I think at that point they were mostly working on the smaller amounts of polish.
Okay, so after your experience in the beta, it sounds like obviously you jumped on board from day one once the retail version of vanilla was released. Would that be right?
Yeah, so I actually had saved up my allowance for, I don't know, months, I think, because I ended up getting the collector's edition. And I know I didn't get much for allowance, so for that collector's edition, it took me probably like 6 months to save up for it.
Wow.
So I had the big box collector's edition, and I was there day one. I think it came with a month of free play, too, so I didn't have to pay for the subscription for the first month.
Right. So how old were you on release?
I probably was about 15 years old at the time. I'm trying to think exactly. My birthday was just around the launch date, so I don't remember exactly the day it launched, so plus or minus a year on that.
Sure, no problems. Now, experience in the game, and as I say, I really do preface this with, I appreciate that the ravages of time may have played with your memory, but experiencing everything from patch 1.1, there have been some rumblings recently that obviously patch 1.1 is something that Blizzard might consider dropping us back into with Classic, and obviously nothing's off the table because we haven't heard anything, but what would your thoughts be on Classic being released at that patch 1.1 point?
Personally, there's the big debate of changes versus no changes. I would say I'm on the side of, hashtag no changes, which includes progressive patching starting at 1.1.
Okay, so you're all for beginning the journey again as we did back in the day and getting the full vanilla experience.
Yeah, exactly. And I will say that I definitely recognize that the game had a lot of major flaws at 1.1. And a lot of those flaws weren't fixed until many patches later. So by no means do I think 1.1 is a perfect game. But my train of thought is any changes they start making to the game are going to lead to more changes. And I worry that the end product will be quite dissimilar from what I kind of think of as a vanilla WoW experience.
Right. Well, pardon the crude explanation. Are you a warts and all kind of no changes person? Or would you want to get out the wart cream and get some of those out of there?
So I would say wart and all, but I think, if I remember right, I was on Windows, so I don't know exactly, but I think when WoW launched, it was not playable on Mac or Linux. So to me, those are the kind of changes that should be introduced. If it launches at 1.1, people on Mac and Linux should be able to play even at 1.1. I don't think there's any reason to eliminate those players just because they couldn't play in 1.1.
I don't know, Super. No changes. Sorry, Mac users.
Man, and then then the other thing is they talk about, I don't actually know what this would do, but there's like a colorblind mode. People are saying adding that into the game is too big of a change. But to me, it's almost gatekeeping. Like, why should I care if someone that's colorblind wants to enjoy 1.1? It makes no sense. It doesn't hurt my experience to allow them to play. So there certainly are some, accessibility and, I wouldn't even say quality of life, but accessibility and modernization changes that need to be made to work on modern hardware. And, even when WoW launched, I don't think Vista was even out, Windows Vista. So, Windows Vista 7, 8, and 10 all technically aren't really compatible with vanilla WoW as is. So, all of these things should be taken into account to allow 1.1 to work and be playable by as many people as possible.
I'm totally with you there. I think it's not game breaking. If I'm all for everything in the name of inclusiveness. So whatever we can to get the game out there to as many people as possible, I'm all for it. Now, let's get into the nitty gritty of things. So we've heard your background and obviously got the details on that. You start off your journey in the vanilla days of World of Warcraft. And at what stage was it you realized that you wanted to hit high-end content?
So I think it was almost a natural progression. I was playing so much and enjoyed it so much. And earlier you mentioned that I consider myself a hardcore player. I would say I used to consider myself a hardcore player back in vanilla, like retail vanilla. Nowadays I'm super casual. I'm very casual now. But at the time I had a lot of free time and I got to 60 on my rogue and started grouping with people. And we were doing 5-man dungeons. And then I was in a guild. And then that guild got a little bit bigger. And then I saw another guild that was even bigger that was starting Molten Core content. So I switched guild and joined them. And I think I don't remember ever saying, I want to do endgame rating when I started WoW. I think I just saw more and more obstacles that I could complete and wanted to go that direction.
So the reason I'm going down this line of questioning is what I basically want to get to is you've mentioned that you became a guild leader. Is that correct? So
I was an officer in a guild. So I wasn't ever the guild leader.
Oh, I
but
see.
The I was like the rogue class leader and also like a general officer on top of that.
Right. Well, nonetheless, that's obviously a position of quite a bit of responsibility within a high-end guild, I'm presuming. And the kind of extra amount of responsibility that's placed on you, what made you want to get into that role?
So I think that's kind of what I was saying, almost just a natural progression where I was so involved. And I mean, I think my rogue, by the time I finished playing him from, late 2004 until maybe May 2007, I had literally like 130 days played, some insane amount over the course of what was, 3 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think because I was so involved and spent so much time on there that it seemed natural for me to also organize the rogues and kind of be in charge of getting the raids together and scheduling things. It just kind of worked out that way.
Okay. So do you remember the name of your guild from back in the day?
Yeah, so it's a long story, but our guild started as Virtus, Virtus, which is a Latin word for something I don't remember now, maybe virtue, I'm not sure. But the long story short is our guild leader literally stole our guild bank and quit one day.
Oh.
So we all switched to a new guild, which we named Sadface, like SADFACE.
Yep. And once Sadface came to be, do you remember kind of what the size and demographic of that guild was?
So Sadface was almost entirely, I think it was all North American, because I think they were all the servers were limited anyway by region. So we were mostly U.S. Central or U.S. East. I think we had a few West Coast players. And most of us were teenagers into early 20s. We had a few people that were in their 30s or 40s. We had a lawyer who was actually one of our main tank was a lawyer, mm-hmm. and he would buy gold. I remember that because he said it was not worth his time to farm gold. He would just buy a bunch of gold and then cover all of his repairs that way.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we're all
sounds
North
like a lawyer
American,
thing to do.
US for the most part, a few Canadian players, I think.
Was it considered a big guild?
Yeah, I think we weren't like a Zerg guild. We weren't like, I think 500 was the max you could have in a guild. I don't think we were maxed out, but we had probably 80 active raiders, I would say. Probably almost enough to run 2 full raids, just about.
Okay, great. So, I mean, that's definitely a pretty decent sized roster. So what I'm fascinated by is really the management of people within a structure such as World of Warcraft and the kind of personalities that it attracts. And as you said, you were an officer, you looked after your class, you were kind of the rogue leader, Rogue One, if you will. Sorry, Star Wars pun. Now, what I'm getting at is I've always felt that World of Warcraft attracts, a certain type of person. And I think that contrary to popular belief, the game is actually full of pretty confident, outspoken people who, whilst they might not be that way or project that way outside of the game, definitely within the game, they're not shy in speaking their mind. So you're one of the people that had to deal with that and deal with the stress of organizing a large group of people, or certainly the rogues within the guild. How was that dealing with it all and where everyone wants an outcome to go their way?
So that's a good point, and I agree, is a lot of people are very strong-minded, not in a bad way, but they just have an opinion and they want to defend it. I remember most of the rogues, we had, I think, about 8 rogues that really raided consistently, maybe 7. And probably 6 of those 7 or 7 of those 8 were really nice people. There was actually a couple, 2 of them were from, I think, Toronto, like a man and woman they were dating. They were really nice. Everyone was really great. There was one guy, though, and it was always one guy who was a huge pain. And the problem was he was always the top DPS rogue by just a little bit. He always was ahead of whoever was second just slightly, which gave him enough of an ego that he would always butt heads. And this guy's name, I remember it was Noiven, Noiven. And I'm sure he's out there still like being a pain in the ass to people on somewhere on live or WoW or something. But he was actually not a terrible guy, but he was so frustrating. And all you can do is just try and understand the other side. So if someone has a complaint or an issue, you try to understand where they're coming from, and you try to find a middle ground between whatever needs to happen and whatever they want to happen.
And was it a situation where when you're in charge of a class, you really just do that micromanagement of those, as you say, those roughly 8 people, look after them, and you don't have to worry as much as what's happening outside of that group?
So our structure was we had class leaders, and those people were kind of in charge of each class, right? So I was a class leader for the rogues, but I was also an officer, so I kind of served both duties. So I would organize the rogues more specifically during a raid. So if we were on the second boss of Black and Laird's Vale, I would kind of go through it ahead of time with the rogues in a rogue channel and let them know kind of the idea of what's supposed to happen, how to mitigate their threat, how to not pull aggro, that kind of stuff. But then as an officer, I would kind of oversee almost more of the DPS in general is kind of what I remember working with a lot. So it was a little bit of both for me. I sort of served a dual position.
So what was it? I mean, you mentioned, as you said, the one frustrating guy, and it just got me thinking just now, like, what was it about rogues? And I played a rogue in vanilla as well, and I came across this a lot. What was it about rogues that seemed to attract the biggest assholes in the game?
So I used to play a gnome mage when WoW launched. For the first month or so, I got to level 26, and his name was Conald, like Conald. I think I thought it was a combination of Arnold Schwarzenegger and Conan the Barbarian, so Conald. But I switched out of him literally the same day I saw a video called Dual Shadows. And if you're an old school WoW PvPer, you might remember the Dual Shadows series. It was literally two rogues that would go around and just gank people. And they were good. They were good PvPers. They would just go out and gank people. And they were undead rogues. And my brother showed me the video. And like that day, I was like, oh man, I want to play a rogue so I can gank people.
It vaguely rings a bell, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, I really think that's what it is. It's the kind of, people see these videos of rogues in the shadows, sneaking out and just like ambush critting someone for 400 damage and killing a lobby. And it's like, oh, that's really fun. And there's some appeal to that kind of, I don't know, just kind of thievery and just like sneaking out and killing people. Mm. And even though I was on a PvE server, which at the time I didn't really consider that I really couldn't do what I saw in those videos because I was on a PvE server, it made me realize that I wanted to be a rogue. And I think that attracts the kind of mindset of people that are out to, gank people and mess with other people's free time rather than, I don't know, like a warrior. You're not going to sneak up on someone as a warrior, really.
Well, there were the old jokes back in the day, and I know every class has kind of had its moment in the sun, so to speak, but definitely one of the overriding concepts of vanilla for quite some time was the old World of Warcraft jokes that you would hear, because they were considered so, not necessarily OP, but just mechanics-wise so hard to deal with, and that attracted a lot of sort of kinds of personalities that felt like they could fuck with people, I guess. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, I agree. And honestly, as a rogue, like I said, I was on a PvE server, so truthfully, I didn't really engage in that much PvP. But in instances like Alterac Valley, I mean, that's all I would do is just sit in stealth and just wait for an opportunity to jump out and just be annoying to someone or stab someone and then run away for no reason, just to annoy them.
Definitely. But as you mentioned, you saw it in the PvE environments as well. And I hope it's been obvious. I do mean present company excluded, of course. But, I always seem to come across a rogue in my days, well, not just one, but multiple rogues who were like, you talk to them, I'd be like, that guy really rubs me the wrong way. But anyway, that I guess was just part and parcel of the class. But you had a lot of fun playing a rogue, I'm presuming.
Yeah, definitely. And like I said, I wasn't big on PvP, which sounds weird because as a rogue, it seems like one of the things you would really enjoy. But honestly, all I did for PvP was I think I grinded to Exalted in Alterac Valley, which is barely PvP. And then I didn't really do any Warsong Gulch or Alterac Basin too much. Maybe I was honored with them. I never got farther than that reputation-wise. So otherwise, and there wasn't much world PvP on a PvE server. So I was dedicated to, I would just go out and grind and like run around and collect herbs for the raids. And I would just spend a ton of time building up my character to be as good as he could be for raiding. Now,
within the raid schedule that you had, or dealing with all those people doing all this stuff through the week, do you remember, was there any kind of guild drama that you had to help manage?
I can't think of specific. I do remember I have some screenshots, I think somewhere buried, of old guild drama that I kept or someone sent to me from the guild years later. But for the most part, I just remember the big thing was always loot. So we did, if I remember right, we did a DKP system. So basically you would earn points for participating in raids, and then you could basically bid or use those points to win the item that drops that you want. And it kept trouble down pretty low for the most part. The problem was, we would sometimes deviate from the DKP system if we cleared a tough boss for the first time, and we wanted our main tank to get, a shield or some major upgrade, we would give it to him instead of the secondary tank that maybe had more DKP. And that occasionally would cause some arguments. Yeah. And I'm sure we've lost some people, but for the most part, most people wouldn't leave the guild over that kind of stuff.
It is interesting. I guess the one thing I haven't really come across, and recently in an episode I did cover sort of the pros and cons of loot councils versus DKP systems. And the one thing I never came across, which is interesting now to have you raise it, is a hybrid system where we'll know certain instances, certain moments will call for an a taking on of the loot council system versus a DKP one where you have to have certain characters geared up to take the next step. So, and as you say, most people seem to be cool with it.
Yeah, if I remembered right, we used just a standard DKP system, but we pretty much had the caveat. We told everyone knew that the first time there's a few pieces of gear that would be significant upgrades for basically our main tanks. Were pretty much the only exceptions was like the main tank and the main off tank. Those two people would generally get priority on certain drops. Like the first time, actually, they killed a Nixia before I joined, but I think the first time they killed a Nixia, the Nixia's head went to, I think it was our main tank. I think it was the main tank at the time. It was either that or I'm thinking of Nefarian. But there's certain things you knew would drop or certain things you really hoped would drop, and we made sure that the tank got their pick first because it really helped progression. It was a significant upgrade going forward for the entire raid if the main tank was well geared.
And in terms of loot with the rogues, did you ever have any kind of bitching within the rogues about how the loot was getting passed around?
The only times I remember is when, so most of our rogues were either, rogues, or they were either dagger spec or sword spec. We had a pretty good split. I think it was maybe like 5 dagger spec and 3 sword spec. The only problem was when a dagger rogue would suddenly decide they wanted that really good sword that dropped and would spend all their DKP to get the sword and then switch to sword spec without anyone else knowing that was going to happen. And then the sword rogues would be really upset because they were really expecting that first sword that drops would be theirs. I do remember daggers and swords. That was always the problem with rogues, is arguing if they would switch back and forth. But for the most part, there weren't, no one, like rogues, if we get a new bracer, no one really cares. Like unless it's like the last piece of a set bonus, no one really cared much. It was really all about weapons for the rogues.
I'm so glad you answered that because you just reminded me of an aspect of WoW vanilla that I had completely forgotten about, because I definitely remember having a moment in chat when you see a rogue saying, "Oh no, I want that sword. I'm switch," and someone would say, "Well, you're clearly using daggers, dude." And they're like, "No, I'm going to switch for that," and it causing arguments. So I completely forgot about that. You just jogged the memory.
Oh man, that, and then the other thing was, especially in like 5-man dungeons, if you're with like a pug, like a pickup group,
yeah,
and like an alchemy recipe drops, and someone's like, "Oh, I'm an alchemist," and like, "Are you sure you are, or you just want that really good recipe?" And you never could really even prove it easily unless they made a potion on the spot, because you couldn't tell what professions people were necessarily.
Totally. Oh God, all the dramas, all the memories flooding back. I love it. But in terms of, do you, and again, do you have any kind of memory of your worst moment or the most frustrating moment for you in being an officer of a high-end guild?
So I mentioned this already briefly, but our old guild leader, and he had a rogue and a warrior. So I think he was a DPS warrior, not a tank. This guy's name was Varric, Varak, and his alt was Exivate, Exivate. This guy was our guild leader of Virtus, Virtus, right? Like the first guild we were in. And one day I logged in and I was out of the guild. I was booted. And so I had a bunch of friends, like on my friends list from the guild. So I whispered, so I was like, "Hey, what's going on? Did I get kicked?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, we all got kicked. The GM just like disbanded all of us and left." And to this day, none of us had any idea what happened. Like, I as far as I know, he just literally got really angry and quit the game. He stayed around and played like on his own for a few weeks, but he just booted everyone out, took the guild bank, which was like, at that time in vanilla, there's no guild bank. Our guild bank was, our guild master had an alt, and we sent all the stuff to him. So he had multiple tunes full of banks, full of reagents from months and months of raiding. He just took it all and left. And I honestly have no idea what happened. So we reformed as Sad Face and restarted raiding, and we were fine. We cleared much. I was like around Blackwing Lair. that he booted us. So we cleared all of AQ40 and maybe about a third or half of Naxxramas, and we were successful. But we couldn't even do anything. You couldn't report it to a in-game ticket or anything. It didn't matter. He just left. There's nothing you can do.
I love so much that you still so vividly remember all the names. I'm picturing like Steve Buscemi in Billy Madison with his list of people to kill, and you've still got all these names up there ready to go.
Man, you have no idea. I can name a ton of people from the guild, and actually, if you go to, I think it's like WoW Wiki or Wowpedia, one of those websites, and you Google Malagos Verdus or Malagos Sadface, you'll see there's like random things on there, some people's names and some other stuff from other characters, but I've got a bunch of screenshots still from a handful of people. And I keep in touch with a couple people from the guild. I'm Facebook friends with a couple of them. Like on my personal Facebook, I'm friends with a few of these people. So it's weird, but they're like in their 40s now, and I'm in my late 20s. And we were friends when they were early 20s or whatever, and I was in my teens. And we still talk once in a while, so we still reminisce about all the stupid things we did.
No, I love it. It just reminded me of, I jumped into, Chronos over the weekend as well. I've alluded to it on on a past podcast episode. I checked out the opening of K3, and people know, I've only just jumped back into Warcraft recently. I walked away from the game for a number of years and have just with basically the conception of this podcast dived back into the game, both in retail and sort of dabbled in that opening of that private server. And in running around in the first few levels on a private server, I had a couple of instances where I was just like, oh, you dick. That's it. You just made the list. And it took me back to a moment back, 13 years ago or whatever it is now, where I used to get so angry about this shit, and I loved it.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's what's so great. One of the things that's so great about vanilla is there's not really, phasing or shards or cross realm stuff for the most part. So generally, if someone makes you mad or they ninja loot something, you're going to remember them. And it's such a small server, you can tell everyone else in the server to avoid playing with, player X or player Y, because they literally will steal loot from you. I mean, that's the community feeling of a small vanilla server is one of the best things about it, I think.
Now, one last question just about your guilds before we move on to the next point. Did you find yourself being a little bit harder on the rogues, obviously being their class leader? Were you quite picky with the way they took on certain encounters, or did you go pretty easy on them because, you were one of the guys kind of thing?
It wasn't so much that I was the leader of them, but just because I could I was a rogue, so I could relate and I knew how the mechanics should work. And to be honest, rogues aren't that hard to play in most vanilla raids. Generally speaking, you go light on DPS to start, you ramp up the DPS a little bit later once the tank's ready, and you use Feint occasionally or just Vanish to wipe all your aggro. And using Vanish, you generally shouldn't pull aggro. It's pretty rare that you ever should. And otherwise, you just go all out DPS. So I would never get mad at someone for having a lower DPS. I would just get mad at someone for pulling aggro, because it's pretty relatively inexcusable to pull aggro.
You touched on at the very start of the episode, and obviously I just mentioned it before then, private servers. Now, have you been playing on private servers a bit lately, or more of late, I should say? And what is it about private servers that keeps you coming back?
So my history with private servers starts one day I was on Twitch and I saw someone playing World of Warcraft, and I clicked it. He had like 12 viewers. I have no idea who this guy is now. I can't remember him at all. And I typed in chat, I was like, what are you playing? This looks like vanilla WoW. He's like, oh yeah, it's a private server called Nostalrius. It just launched yesterday. Like, oh, okay. And so like the next day I downloaded it maybe a week later and started playing. And I've been playing ever since, basically on vanilla private servers. And I it's not a perfect representation of vanilla WoW, retail vanilla, but it's close enough that I enjoy myself. I'm having fun, even though it's not a perfect reincarnation.
And have you found yourself gravitating back towards the same kind of roles that you found yourself in the vanilla days? Have you replicated your run through, or have you gone out and done something completely different?
Class-wise, I started playing as a rogue in level to 60, and I've done a few endgame raids with him. But just due to my life now, I don't have the time I had when I was a teenager. And so I don't really raid. I very rarely raid on a private server. I mostly just level. I enjoy leveling a lot, I found out. I didn't know this back in retail vanilla, but I actually do enjoy leveling. So most of my time now is spent leveling different characters up from 1 to 60 and kind of exploring quests that I never explored before. And recently I've been trying more Alliance tunes because I had never played Alliance before.
So with you rolling a rogue again on and going through that whole experience again on private servers, dare I ask, do I think I know which class you're going to be playing for Classic?
I'll definitely have a rogue. I'm absolutely going to have a rogue on there at some point. I'll hit 60 for sure. I think, though, I've really enjoyed playing Warlocks and Priests a lot more recently, and I'm considering trying a whole new tune for Classic. I'm really thinking of something that I've never done before, which is like a Paladin. Like I literally have never rolled even a level 1 Paladin, and something completely different like that sounds like a cool way to experience Classic, I think.
You're definitely dedicated to the rogue cause. I love it. God, we should put you in the Hall of Fame of rogues. I look at it as like 180 levels of rogue play, and like my stomach churns when I hear about that. I would, I couldn't picture, although I must admit lately I have been thinking more and more, God, it's been a long time since I played a rogue, and I've thought about it, but something just pulls me away going, no, as much as I enjoyed it, I just want to try something else.
You know, rogues are a lot of fun for a lot of reasons, especially PvP. I think I've done a little more PvP on them, open world at least, since playing on private servers. And I do enjoy rogues a lot, obviously. The one thing that's really big holdback is that there's almost no way to self-heal. You're pretty much, your only option is with bandages or potions, I guess, but really bandages. And otherwise, you only have really one escape. You can vanish, right? So vanish is a great escape tool, but it's on a decent cooldown. So that's like your only chance to escape. If you pull too many mobs and you're out soloing, you're kind of dead in the water unless you have vanish up. So it's a fun class to play, but it can be a little tedious. And it's certainly not one of the easiest classes or fastest classes to level, but it's a lot of fun.
Now, you mentioned earlier, obviously, with, you know, unfortunately, we all get older. The vanilla days were a long time ago. We were much younger and more handsome men back then. But how much do you get to play World of Warcraft these days?
I honestly probably play 2 to 4 hours a week, I would say. It's pretty much what my routine is. I'll get up between maybe as early as 4:30, but probably about 5 a.m., and I'll play WoW for about 45 minutes to an hour. And usually, a lot of times, I'll record that for my YouTube channel. Mm-hmm. And then I go shower, have some breakfast, and then go to work, probably getting to work no later than 8 a.m.
Now, the reason I ask is I don't think I'm off with this one, but we're both professionals. We both work in different but relatively complex fields. I work in law, you work in science. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I work in science right now. Yeah, exactly.
Right. So you have to balance what is, you know, a pretty full-on job. You've got a family and you've got your YouTubing career as well, and you try to obviously game as well. What kind of tips would you have for people that balance all of these things? But let's say, for example, want to get into the YouTubing side of things like you do. So for that part, I mean, so you call it like my YouTube career, and I guess you could say that's a fair way to assess it, but I really think of it as a hobby. Like, by no means am I ever planning to become a full-time YouTuber or live streamer or Twitch person or anything like that. Not because I wouldn't enjoy it, but because I really, really like, and I'm really fulfilled in my professional career, and I would never want to give that up. Even if the money from YouTube would exceed what I would make in my professional career, I still would never switch over, I don't think. Oh, so with that said, the thing about becoming, maybe if you want to call me successful on YouTube, let's say you want to call it that. The thing is, I just do what I enjoy doing. And for the most part, it's kind of boring stuff to a lot of people, I think, but I like leveling, a tune in WoW. So I record myself while I level and I turn it into a video. It doesn't take much time. I basically play the game for 1 hour. I do maybe 10 minutes of editing at the end to tie up a few, if I sneeze real loud in the microphone, I might cut that out. And then I render the video and upload it, maybe spend 5 minutes on a thumbnail. So for every hour I play WoW, I might spend an hour and 15 minutes of actual time to make that video. And it's not really that much of a time commitment if I go what I call kind of a low effort route towards making videos. Okay, you mentioned that obviously you say you view it as something as simple as just hitting record when you're leveling a character, and you mainly do put up a lot of sort of, as they say, let's play videos on your channel, but you also delve a little bit deeper at times. And one of the videos that I particularly enjoyed that you did recently was your analysis of the so-called leaked footage that popped up on Twitter recently. How much time went into that little investigation and the production of that video?
Right. So that leaked footage, or quote unquote leaked footage, I know I was slow on that. By the time I got that video out, I think the discussion had been carried on for a couple of weeks and then ended. But it just took me a while to get all the footage I needed for it. And I probably spent 4 to 5 hours putting that video together. But what I do is basically every now and then, such as that video, I find a topic that is interesting to me and that I think would be fun to discuss in a little more detail. And for example, in that video, a lot of people had discussed many of the points that I brought up already. But until you really line them up side by side and can see, the torch from the Twitter video and the torch from a vanilla server is side by side, and especially if I throw like a Legion torch in there, until you see all three together, I think it's hard to make any strong conclusions. So in that video, I wasn't necessarily reinventing the wheel, but I thought it'd be a lot of fun to kind of show all the evidence and line it up together. And truthfully, that's a little bit of what I do in my day job is I, collect data and then kind of compare different, like a control experiment versus, a test experiment. And I put those data side by side and decide what is my conclusion from them. And that's basically what I did in video form there. Those videos take about 4 or 5 hours maybe.
Okay, I completely understand. Like, I live and die by the same sword in my professional life. I have to live completely with evidence. And at the end of the day, if the evidence isn't there, I have to fall on my sword at times and say in open court, I don't think I've got this one, Your Honor. And, so I do understand that it's all sort of gathering information and gauging something and then giving what should be a mature and responsible conclusion. And I think yours was great at the end of the day because you said you ultimately decided that it was not, in your mind, vanilla alpha footage, that it was just from a Wrath of the Lich King client. Is that right?
Yeah, so exactly. And to be fair, a lot of people came to that conclusion. I don't want to say that I'm the only one that said, oh, this is a Wrath of the Lich King client. A lot of people, I think, said the same thing. But right, and that's the conclusion I also came to, is that I really would be surprised if that was any sort of an alpha classic WoW client. If it is, that'd be really interesting, and maybe not good, but really interesting. But I'd be quite surprised if that was the case.
Yeah, I did find it interesting that the chatter around that footage, as you've mentioned, it seemed to die down pretty quickly after the footage was released, and it seems that people just weren't talking about it as much. And I got the impression that people did kind of just accept that it was just too hard to tell, and that story flamed out really quickly, didn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what I was thinking. By the time I got in there, I was late. I mean, it was a couple weeks, I think, after most of the conversation died down, which is why I kind of, even though it was late, I had been working on the video. I wanted to release it anyway, obviously. And I thought it was the last chance to really show some side-by-side comparisons. And I think the people were right to let that conversation die down. I don't think, trying to tease out anything from the video was really going to happen beyond the discussion that already existed or, my side-by-side video.
Although the one thing you did that I must admit I really, really loved is your great point was that curve to the camera track in Northshire. I loved that. And it reminded me a little bit of like watching Inception, where I'm sitting there going, they leave it up to interpretation. I'm like, there's no interpretation. It's the totem is blatantly spinning still. Oh, sorry, blatantly falling down, I mean. But that camera track is blatantly different. Like it does curve a little bit more.
Yeah, and I don't know if anyone ever, I didn't play in Wrath of the Lich King, and I don't have a Wrath of the Lich King client actually to test that. I don't know if they changed the camera tracking for some reason. I don't know why they would do that. And I really don't know. So that was one of the parts where I was kind of, it was obviously different, but why it was different, I don't know. I'm not really sure.
And just to sum up sort of the YouTubing in general, what is it that really pushed you to get involved with all that?
So if you go back to one of my earliest videos on my channel, it's like 2015, I made a few videos for the game Heroes of the Storm. This is Blizzard's like alternative to Dota or League of Legends. And I was literally making a video showing how to do something called a backdoor on the enemy's base using a hero named Abathur. And this was just for a few of my friends, like literally a few of my friends. I want to show them what I was doing. So I kind of narrated it just for fun and put the video online. And then about a week or two later, I saw it had like 7,000 views. And the other few videos I had on my channel would have, 5 views, like literally 5 to 10. It's like, whoa, that's really cool. I got like thousands of views on this video, and all I did was play a game for 20 minutes and talk about it. So that literally one day I was driving, I was like thinking about it. It's like, wow, that's really fun. That's a really cool thing. I want to make more videos for YouTube. And that was like how it started. I started making Hearthstone videos and Heroes of the Storm. And then one day I was playing on Nostalrius at the time. I was like, I should just start a new leveling series on this tune or on this server. And I think in like August or September that year, I made a leveling series. And that's kind of where it started. My WoW stuff really started from that point, I guess.
Now, I know you don't necessarily want to term your YouTube channel as successful, and I appreciate that. But I mean, I would just tell you that I'm sure that there's a lot of people out there that would give the proverbial left nuts to have the amount of subscribers that you have. And I think you produce some great content. And my question is, if you were to go back in, if you were to have some young sort of Soupasokas listening now who wanted to get into YouTubing, but they're not quite sure how, what would be your overriding piece of advice to those people in how to get involved?
I think there's a lot. I mean, there's a million things I think you could give as advice. So I can only really speak from my perspective and what has seemingly worked for me. The most important thing for me is that I found something that I enjoy doing, which for the most part, and probably 80% of my videos are literally WoW Let's Plays. And then 20% are like little feature pieces that I make. But I've done things that I enjoy doing. And I'm fortunate because I have a career on the side that's, my actual full-time career, that I don't rely on YouTube to have a home and to have food. So for me, everything I do on YouTube is just for fun. It's actually relaxing for me. So my recommendation is to not necessarily go at YouTube initially and say, I'm going to make a career out of this, but find something that you have fun doing and consistently do it. So I try to upload videos every week. I usually upload a couple videos, 2 to 3 videos per week. And I just try to remain consistent in both the quality and timing of things.
I would say that's some pretty sage advice. Now, Soupa, now that we've gotten through all that, one thing I'd love to do, as you've heard the show before, you're aware that I do every episode I do an anger management segment. And what I've asked you to do today, and if you're up for it, is to come back with a little bit of a personal bit of anger management from the Soupasoka tailored rant about World of Warcraft. Are you up for it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Fantastic. All right. Now it's time for anger management.
Okay, so it's not so much about the game, it's about the people surrounding the game, and this is including fans and YouTubers or content creators, and a little bit of Blizzard themselves, but I'll get into that. Basically, first of all, I don't get super angry about these things because it is just a game to me, but it's a game I do care about. It's really kind of embarrassing to the degree by which people are taking the hashtag changes versus hashtag no changes, fights. It honestly blows my mind that people are so angry about these things. And I get that it's a game that has meant a lot to a lot of people for literally over a decade, almost 15 years now. But it's like, at the end of the day, we're all people, and we all want what we think is best for ourselves, for the most part. And if you don't come to the other side and just consider, what happens if they change the game? What happens if they don't change the game? What happens from Blizzard's perspective? I'm not saying that, let's get free-flying mounts level 40 is a good idea. I think anyone that seriously says that for Classic WoW should probably be laughed out of the conversation. But for people that are saying, like earlier I mentioned, what if we add a colorblind mode to the game? Is that really that unreasonable? I think that's actually honestly unreasonable to not consider it. And so it is a change. but I don't think it's a change that negatively impacts the game, and honestly will only help by hopefully increasing the audience. Even if the rate of color blindness is maybe, let's say, 3 to 7%, if we get 3 to 7% more people playing Classic WoW, that's a good thing for everyone, including Blizzard, and might actually help other companies consider bringing back their old MMORPGs, which it's a long shot, but it'd be a really cool thing if we bring back tons and tons of companies, old games, EverQuest 1, EverQuest 2, Meridian 59, all these really old MMORPGs. So I think we have a great opportunity here, and people need to be a little nicer to each other when they discuss the changes versus no changes.
Well said, and I'm glad you got... I know you said you're not super angry about it, but I'm glad you got that off your chest. Now, the next segment I want to get through super with you is the final segment of the show. I call it the hot seat, where I put the interviewee on the hot seat and ask you 8 fun questions just to wrap up the show. So you ready for this one?
Yep, let's do it.
Okay, question number 1. Ruling out when is Classic coming out, if you could ask one Classic-related question of the devs right now, what would that question be?
It's gotta be, will there be changes or no changes?
Fair enough. Now, next question. Now, are you familiar with the game Fuck, Marry, Kill?
Yep.
Okay, we're going to do a World of Warcraft version of Fuck, Marry, Kill, and I've got 3 raids for you. So think of it just of which kind of raid did you have a bit of fun with, which raid could you sit in forever, or which raid would you never want to visit again. So Fuck, Marry, Kill. Naxxramas, AQ, and Blackwing Lair.
Let's say... kill AQ40 because it was such a long instance just to run through. Marry Blackwing Lair because I spent the most time there and I think I really have a connection with it.
Yeah.
And let's F Naxxramas in that case because it was honestly super difficult instance, and most importantly the 4 Horsemen was a ridiculous gear check in the sense of how many tanks you needed to actually complete that fight.
Very good. Next up, if you were stuck on a desert island with one NPC from the game, who would it be and why?
Let's go with a dragon. I'm trying to think what's a good one. Because if I get a dragon, we could definitely fly out of there, right? So I'm going to say Onyxia because I think I could convince her to be friendly with me and not just kill me.
I love it because you're the second person now, and this just again proves how much more intelligent my guests and the listeners are in general than myself, because you're the second person now in a row to answer with someone who would help get them off the desert island, whereas my answer would be something as stupid as my answer is Sylvanas, because I'm like, hey, I could be stuck on a desert island with Sylvanas, that'd be great. and I'm not even thinking about getting off the damn thing.
Yeah, you might want to reconsider that one.
Absolutely. No, I love it. That's fantastic. Now, next up, what's the meanest thing that you've ever done in the game?
I've definitely mind-controlled people off of high places or off of, boats and things. I've definitely done that.
You've enjoyed that little part of the game?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still leveling a priest right now, but honestly, mind-controlling people into, awkward spots is one of the best things about a priest. Now,
can you name one class that you are happy enough to say that you categorically suck at?
I would say rogues in PvP is honestly, I'm really bad at PvPing, and I would say rogue's gotta be the one. It's got to be the answer.
Okay. Now, what is your guess as to the release date of World of Warcraft Classic?
I'm pretty confident we're seeing a spring 2019 release, but keep in mind that spring 2019 runs until, I think, June 21st. So that is almost, halfway through 2019. That's my guess. And I base that on, we know now that it's, I think, August, they said, for the release of BFA. My speculation is that they're not going to release anything that would compete with BFA within the first few months of launch. Mm-hmm. So that could be as late as a late 2018 release in time for Christmas. Could happen for Classic WoW. But I still kind of feel they're going to wait and release it a little bit more of a quiet time of the year, such as a springtime where they have no other major releases planned.
Okay. Now, what was the moment that you fell in love with World of Warcraft?
So I go back to that video I mentioned, the Dual Shadows, the Rogue PvP videos. That was really, I enjoyed playing my gnome mage at the time, but that was a video where I first said, wow, that is a really cool, a really fun thing I'm seeing. It's just two rogues running around and they're just jumping people, and they're fair fights in some cases, but they were good, fun fights to watch. And it was what was it? It was not Linkin Park. I can't remember the music that was in the background of it, but the music was there, and it was the cliche PvP music you would hear from a 2004, 2005 WoW video. But that was the moment I definitely remember saying, "Oh man, this is a great game."
Like something off Collision Course.
Sorry, what?
Like a track off Collision Course or something, the Jay-Z and Linkin Park mashup.
Yeah, exactly. It was exactly something like that. It was great. And so that was when I switched over. I was like, yeah, I'm definitely going to switch to Rogue, and that's going to be the WoW that I experience.
Okay. Last question of the day, Super. Tell me why you are excited for World of Warcraft Classic.
When I think of vanilla WoW, I think of the community of, a server of, 2,000 to 5,000 people, maybe 2,000 to 6,000, with maybe 2,000 to 3,000 online at any given time. And that kind of closed community. You'll have one or two maybe big guilds on the Horde, one or two big guilds in the Alliance, and these are high-end raid guilds. And then you'll have a handful of maybe a smaller PvP guild or social guild. But everyone kind of knows their place. And it's not that the big PvP or the big raid guilds are better than the rest, but we all know where we stand, and we all can relate and be friends or competitors depending on, what kind of guild you are. And I think I'm really looking forward to that really tight-knit sense of community that I don't think you can get with modern WoW. And I say that as someone that really enjoys modern WoW, but I do not get that sense of community by any sense anymore.
No, it's definitely a unique community, and it's something that I've come to experience much more so through this podcast, and the listener feedback that I get is the amazing people that play this game, and it's something that I can't wait to dive back into and get to talking to new people and having fresh experiences with new friends as well. So, Super, I just want to say that's everything. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Can you please, once again, what have you got to plug? Where's your YouTube channel, and where can people find you?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, first of all. But YouTube is Soupasoka Gaming. Just type in Soupasoka, Soupasoka. I'm the only Soupasoka on YouTube as far as I know. And I'm on Twitter at Soupasoka Gaming. If you want to talk to me, Twitter, tweeting at me, or sending me a direct message is probably the easiest way to get a hold of me personally.
And do you stream at all?
I stream on YouTube maybe once every 2 to 3 months for maybe 2 to 3 hours, just occasionally. Streaming is so much harder to schedule for me that I tend to not do it very often.
But if you do you announce it on Twitter?
Yeah, I try to put it on Twitter a few days ahead of time. At least a few days ahead of time, I'll usually mention it.
No worries. Well, once again, I cannot thank you enough for reaching out to me and offering to be on the show. I've loved having you chat all things World of Warcraft, and this was a lot of fun. And I'd love to maybe sometime later down the track, if we ever get the moment, to pick up again on another topic.
Yeah, I think maybe a follow-up after the release of Classic especially be great. But I really appreciated being on here. Had a lot of fun. So good luck with everything.
And that's another fantastic Countdown to Classic interview in the books. Big thanks again to Soupasoka for taking the time out for that interview. I just want to say that Super has been an absolute pleasure to deal with. both during that interview and also with the show in general. He's been supportive of Countdown to Classic from near day one. As I mentioned earlier, that interview was recorded on April 8th, some weeks ago. The interview had to wait some time before we got it out to you, but Super was nothing short of a gentleman during that grace period. And I just want to really impress how thankful I am to him for being on the show. Now, moving on. Unfortunately, I haven't had the time to take any calls for Calling Countdown this week, but that will come roaring back to the show next week if I get some phone calls from some of you this weekend. So if you see me put the call out on Twitter or on Discord, please do answer the bat signal and call into the show so that we have some more Calling Countdown next week. But that's about it. But please do hang around as I've got some show news and a very, very special thank you to get through just after I thank the show's patrons. So, shout out to Countdown Council members Borzen, Palfurus, Seven Winters, Tsunami, Wilson Ma, and Valaco. Thank you so much. You know the show wouldn't be the same without you. Also, a huge thank you to supporters Myrtle Banks and Rarebit. Thank you as always. Stay tuned for more Countdown to Classic on Friday, everyone, where I'll be venturing back into the thick jungle that is the forums for a chat about what you've all been talking about lately online, as well as a focus on frost mages. So if you're a mage, or in particular a frost mage, you'll have to listen and make sure I get it all right. On top of this, I just wanted to send a very heartfelt shout out. And this shout out goes to every single one of you listening now. This past week, Countdown to Classic turned 3 months old. Since beginning this adventure from a lowly level 1 WoW podcaster, the show has since amassed 50,000 plus listens across all media platforms where you can find the show, be it iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, or simply through the website. If you had told me at episode number 1 that this show would have 50,000 listens, over 200 members in a Countdown to Classic Discord server, and a dedicated, amazing fan base after 3 months, then I would have punched you in the face and told you that I don't appreciate liars. But now that we're here, and with the show still growing week by week, I think we did actually about 6,500 downloads just last week alone, I just wanted to take the time to give some love to the true heroes of Countdown to Classic. You, the listeners. We've built a fun little ship here and she seems pretty seaworthy. So I'd ask all of you to continue to please sail along with me as my co-first mates as we continue to sail these amazing World of Warcraft classic waters. Some of you have been with us since day one, some of you are fresh recruits, but all of you are valued. If you'd like to see the show grow even more, and so many of you send me the most amazing thank yous from out of the blue asking how you can help the show, then the answer is this. Please simply just talk about the show. Tell a friend who plays the game. Tell a random in-game. Tell a pug or your guild that you're listening to Countdown to Classic. And when they all say, what the fuck is that? You can say, it's great. It's got this crazy Australian guy who sounds way too excited to be there and he screams and he yells and it's got it all. But word of mouth will help us grow. And we'll have even more amazing people sending their stories into memory lane, venting their frustrations through anger management, calling the show on Calling Countdown, putting their hands up for expert interviews, and contributing to the phenomenal World of Warcraft related chats that we have in the Discord channel. So again, if you share this dream with me of being part of something special, I say thank you from the bottom of my heart for giving me even just 1 second of your busy day to allow me to talk World of Warcraft with you. But for now, that's everything, folks. Thank you so much for listening to this episode and continuing to support Countdown to Classic, which will be bringing you more and more fun content each and every week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. See you all in 48 hours, everyone. Until then.